Okay, here we go. In 3, 2, and welcome everybody to the Planetmullins podcast. I'm here in one of our intergalactic Planetmullins churches today in honor of my fantastic guest, the classical composer Danaë Vlasse. And she's agreed to join us. She's a very accomplished member of the Recording Academy with several great albums out. Her latest album is called Poem. Did I say that right?
Yes.
And we're happy to welcome you to the Planetmullins podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So happy to
Great.
speak with you.
Yeah, you look like you're in a good mood and you're as lovely as usual. And that brings me to my sponsor. My sponsor is also French today. Today's broadcast is being sponsored by Pierre's Fine Pianos, which is not only a concert venue, but it's where I base my music teaching program in Los Angeles. And he is the exclusive dealer in the Western United States of the Fazioli piano.
Oh.
And you can find, oh, they're great. Yeah, Herbie Hancock's piano is actually on stage in our concert venue there. And it's a great place. It's at 11039 West Pico, Pierre's Fine Pianos. You can find them on the internet at pierresfinepianos.com. And Pierre and Wynn will be happy to speak to you about spending that extra $200,000 that you've got on a Bosendorfer Fazioli. How about that?
I actually played for Mr. Fazioli once.
Oh, you did in Italy?
Not in Italy, he was in America. I don't know what business in general, but I just was in a showroom that had a Fazioli, and
Wow.
I had read about Faziolis, and I was immediately drawn to try the piano. They actually had several, and I didn't really pay attention. I was just practicing some things that I had in my fingers and just playing through, having a good time. And I was aware that there was this little gentleman with a cane and a little hat who was kind of standing off to the side, really watching me.
Uh-huh.
And as soon
Was
as
he
I stopped
watching? Was he
playing, he
watching you?
introduced.
Wow. Did he watch you from the back? He was looking at your back first.
No, just off to the side.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And he introduced himself, and I was
Oh,
so happy to meet him. And then he took me to the really big concert ground, and he told me all about it and had me play it. And I think I was working on Saint-Saëns' second piano concerto at the time, so I was doing
okay.
all the crazy runs from the middle,
Uh-huh.
and it was so much fun. He was a darling man, and I absolutely adore the Fazioli brand.
Wow, that's incredible because being at Pierre's as long as I've been there, I worked with Pierre more than 20 years, and I have not had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Fazioli yet. So, that's incredible that you've met him, and I'm at the store all the time, and I haven't met him. But I wanted to just tell a few of my listeners, because this is a bit different than my normal podcast, because I've been having like rock drummers and um, uh, blues guitar players and people like that on. So for those people out there that don't know anything about your music, you're a member of the Grammys Recording Academy, National Recording Association of Recording Arts and Sciences. You're an award-winning composer. You're also a pianist. You write lyrics, and you're a music producer. That's a lot of stuff. You've been featured on numerous international radio broadcasts, film and TV. You've performed all over Europe and North America. You released several albums, and that's a lot right there. The earlier today when I was doing my show prep, and I know this doesn't have much to do with your newest album, I watched on YouTube this thing that you wrote called Rainbow Nebulae.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God, that is a crazy. And I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly because I don't know how to pronounce all these names in like the classical choral world that you're in, because it's not usually my bag. But is it Plitman? Hyla Plitman?
Gila. It's
Hila
Gila
Plitman
Klitman.
and Sangeeta Kaur, who's just unbelievably outstanding. And I think both you and I attended her concert at East West
Mhm.
Studios in LA last week, and she's a new age artist that's friends with our buddy Greg Shelsa, and she's got that. What everybody always says about Sangeeta is the voice of an angel, right? And when I heard her and Gila singing this thing, and I was looking all through the stage, and I was like, where's Danaë? Where's Danaë? Because I knew it was your music, right? I looked over at the harp and it's not you. And then I looked over at the guitar player and I'm like, oh yeah, we're not friends. And then I looked over at the conductor and it wasn't you. And I was like, where is Danaë? Because you would think, you know, most people would think if there's a performance, then the person writing the song is going to be up there on the stage. But in that, you were just kind of observing people do all this stuff you had thought of.
I was in the front row in the audience, yeah. And Sangeeta and Hila are my soul sisters, my
Okay,
muses, one of the greatest sources of inspiration.
nice.
And we absolutely collaborate at every opportunity. And you're right, Sangeeta has a beautiful album that's just come out last week called Illuminance. And so she's one of these amazing incredibly versatile artists who has classical training, but who can really tackle any genre. Even Hila I've heard Hila do jazz. Oh, wow.
Wow, isn't that cool?
I know it's really amazing to see people who are able to be versatile in multiple genres. I'm not, so it makes me incredibly humbled to see that.
Well, that's nice. I mean, what they always say is about, you know, musicians and doing mixed bags. We call them bags. That's what the jazz guys are. It's like, well, I'm in a rock bag today, or a jazz bag, or a funk bag, or a reggae bag. But, you know, my background is so much in all these diverse things because I didn't follow the same pathway that you did educationally.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can get into the difference between, you know, the jazz education, the jazz world, classical. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. But I did a lot of network TV, so I had to get good at all of these weird kind of things because they're not going to call, you know, 15 different keyboard players for one 30-minute show. They say, you're going to play, so you're going to do an orchestral thing, then you're going to do some hip hop, and then you're going to do some banjo. And I really did. I worked on this TV show called Moesha, starring Brandy, and the cue sheet would come in, and I look at it and I just go, holy smokes, how am I going to do all this on a Roland keyboard and a computer by 5 o'clock, you know? But the danger in that, honestly, is that you get so spread out that you're not really known as a specialist in anything. And the good thing about someone like you is you're very focused in your genre, which, you know, you can put more energy and more of your genius into that one thing, right?
It's where my heart is at the moment, and I don't discount that I may explore other genres.
Okay.
I'm drawn, like many of my colleagues, to contemporary instrumental, new age styles.
And
More
that's what Sangeeta's thing is. She's considered a new age.
She is, yeah.
Now,
But
I listened to your album, a few cuts off the poem thing, and I know as part of the Academy, you've been submitted for a Grammy nomination in a thing called Classical Compendium. And maybe you can tell people about that, because when I thought about that word compendium, I was like, okay, it's a combination of appendages or pendulums. And I couldn't figure out the word means, but since you're in that category, maybe you can explain to the viewers what that means.
It is probably the most confusing of the classical subcategories, for sure. The compendium category is for albums that combine what they consider subgenres.
Right.
So you wouldn't be able to submit this album in any of the other categories because it doesn't quite fit in any of the other categories. It's not just instrumental solo, it's not just chamber music, it's not just choral, it's not just vocal. If it's a mix of vocal, solo, or chamber music, choral, or any combination of those things, then it doesn't work in the other categories. It has its own compendium category. So think of it as a collection of works
Okay.
of multiple subgenres.
Okay.
And in most cases, they're united by theme, which brings cohesion to the album. So in this case, my album Poème is cohesive in the sense that it's all in French.
Wow.
Everything that's sung is in French, but all of the music is poetically driven. So everything that I wrote was in honor of or to fit the mood of a specific poem.
I see. So, well, I listened to it, and I'm a real like emotionally kind of wacky person. And if you know any of my friends, or if we ever have a cocktail together, you'll notice that I go from this. I can be like extremely happy, and then I can get up and I can play this song that just makes everybody cry in the first four bars and want to kill themselves. And when I listen to your music, I feel this like super powerful emotion, but it seems like the themes you're talking about, a lot of them are kind of like dark and depressing and a little scary. And I look at you and I go, okay, this is, so I remember when we met, and we hadn't met yet, but we were both at some nutty award show, me, the jazz composer, you, the classical composer, and we're at the Hard Rock Cafe in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And it was lined up with all these banquet tables and stuff. And people are like, doing the little mixer thing and everything. And then you come walking over to where, because it was all assigned seating, and you come like a floating frickin' goddess or something over. Just, she comes floating along. And all the men in that part of the room are just like, oh, they had this, I did too. I didn't know who it was. And I said, well, that one's right there. Whoever that is, that's the goddess of the night, whoever that is, and then when you got up to accept your awards, I kept thinking, she's so elegant, and you had on this beautiful dress, and you just kept making the walk, because I think they gave you like 60 awards that night. I mean, your feet must have got really tired, because it's like, oh God, I got to walk over there again.
And that's why you always wear comfortable heels.
Oh, is that the reason? Well, I just wondered, and this may sound stupid, but were you one of those, when you were younger, did you have to practice that walk or anything to get that walk down? Because that's one of those things. My mom would watch me early on, God rest her soul, and she'd see me walk up to get an award, and she would say, "You're slouching, your posture's still terrible. Stand up straight and speak up louder when you're getting an award. You're our son," that kind of a thing. But you're obviously European in origin. It said that you were born in France, and your dad is Greek and your mom is French.
Yes.
So that's pretty interesting. I mean, you have a very exotic kind of look and feel to you, and also to your music. So what was it? Was it anything cultural that made you go, okay, I'm going to do classical music based on, my dad listened to it or my mom listened to it? How did you get involved in the whole thing?
Yes, classical music is almost entirely what we heard at home.
Okay.
So, occasionally we would hear Greek folk songs.
Uh-huh.
Because my father had several records, big records of Greek music, which were traditional folk songs that he loved and grew up with. And of course we would attend Greek festivals and dance, etc. The
so great.
Greek line dances. But the majority of the music that I heard growing up was classical. Right. And I began studying the piano, I think I was not quite 5 years old, so I don't even remember my first lessons.
Wow.
And so immediately my trajectory was into classical music.
Uh-huh. And, the difference, as we talked on the phone the other day, with jazz, your preparation and your process is a completely different thing, because you're going into and the teacher should have told us this, because you get all excited and you're like, okay, I'm going to play my first gig. And the teacher should have said, well, they're not going to let you park within 3 miles of the venue. And people are going to be shouting and getting really drunk, and then, throwing requests in your face while you play, or telling you to get off the stage. Because that's kind of, jazz is what I call, it's like rowdy music. It's more bar oriented. I mean, it's gotten more respectable now, especially since Wynton Marsalis became this huge thing, and he always had a suit and nobody had a chart in front of them. It was like, ooh, Wynton Marsalis, he's making it more respectable. Mm-hmm. But in classical, there's a certain kind of, class and a certain kind of attitude about it. And I'm just wondering why, how did you end up going into that instead of saying, okay, I'm going to lead a all-girl cover band and call it the Gypsy Queens? I mean,
well,
because that's what I would have done.
I wasn't rebellious enough.
Oh, okay. Well, did you have brothers and sisters, or are you an only child?
I'm a triplet. I have two brothers.
Oh my goodness. And what do they do? You just carry your stuff around?
Never really. No, both have advanced degrees in computer science and
Uh-huh.
aerospace engineering.
Well, that's where that weird tie-in between your father and my father tie in, because my dad was a newspaper man, but he got drafted by NASA to do technical work on the Apollo missions. And so I had been living in Los Angeles, and then he moved the family out to Denver. And I noticed in one of your other interviews, you said that your dad worked for NASA. So we have that in common. Isn't that crazy?
That's wonderful. Yes, I'm so proud of my father's accomplishments professionally. He did some really amazing things, because he's in many ways the embodiment of the American dream
Uh-huh.
because he's from a small island. It's known in Greek mythology. It's called Ithaca,
Okay.
and it's one of the Ionian Isles on the west side of Greece, of the peninsula.
Okay.
And he was the son of a fisherman and grew up in a very, very impoverished little port village of just
Wow.
fishermen. And they had goats that they milked and chickens from which they got eggs. And it was a very modest experience. And
Right.
he
Sure.
really had the dream to expand his knowledge of science. And he was fortunate enough, he had an aunt and uncle who had immigrated to America. So as a teenager, about 14, my father moved to live with his aunt and uncle in order to advance his science education. And from there, he went on to Brown and did two PhDs at
Wow.
um, Columbia. I mean, really important schooling.
Wow.
And that is not how he remained in America, though. In fact, he was poached by the French government to go work for them. And so he was in France for a little over a decade, and that's the time that he met my mother, and then my mother.
Oh, so it came down to the French woman poached the man. Now, this is the album that I want you and I to do. It's going to be called French Women Poaching the Greek Men, volume, volume 37, Ionian Dorian.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
It's easy to fall in love in France because I've done it several times. And,
Oh.
it's beautiful over there, but it's also easy to get beat up and robbed. And that's happened to me in France before too, at the airport.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but obviously I'm okay. So, we don't have to like go in depth about that. But I want to talk more about this new project of yours, because when we were doing our initial conversation, you said you had a really large team assembled, and one of the people on your team is our associate David Brunt, the choral concert producer guy.
Well, he's not directly involved with Poem. He and
Oh,
I
he's
were
not.
working very closely together to produce a big choral concert for this summer that would have been a number of really significant world premieres. It was a music of living composers
Hmm.
and some composers that are already established and whose works are just beloved, such as Eric Whittaker, Morton Lauridsen. But then there were also a lot of world premieres, and that was a whole year of preparation with the choral director, Michelle Jensen,
Wow.
and the choir, the Sterling Ensemble. And we had to put a hold on the concert because of the pandemic. So for the
Hmm.
moment, it's just a later date to be announced. I really don't know when that may be. Maybe next summer. We'll see.
Okay, but going back to the style of the music and the whole beautiful world of your stuff, I mean, because I've written some things that are interplanetary, and I'm always been considered kind of a cosmic dude, with Planetmullins as my website. Like, I don't fit into Earth, and I have my own planet. And I live over there, and I did an album called Galaxy 12 about star fields and this and that. How did you come up with this nebulae concept? Like, do you have visions? Does your music come to you when you're staring into outer space, or what's your process when you're writing?
Well, In that case, I need to answer the question in two parts. To answer the question about the nebula in particular, Rainbow Nebula was a piece that was written for a concert at an observatory. It's a historic dome called the Mount Wilson Observatory above Pasadena,
Mm-hmm.
here just north of Los Angeles in the mountain range here. And it's a 100-year-old dome where we discovered our place in the universe. It was the first place that really gave us a perspective on where we were in our universe. From
So
a
is it
scientific.
because they had a telescope up there, or was it just like a big cask of wine and several Greek monks chanting Gregorian stuff?
They had a really amazing telescope, which
Oh,
is
the telescope.
a 100-inch diameter telescope, which at the
Wow.
time was the largest that was built. And so there was this really gorgeous concert there with the two sopranos that we spoke about earlier, Sangeeta Kaur and Hila Plitman, Michelle Jensen, the same choral director that was going to do a concert in June this year that had to be postponed,
Hmm.
with not her entire choir. We literally couldn't fit that many people in the space, so we had only 16 voices instead of over 20.
Wow.
And we had harp, guitar, flute, and violin. And it was an absolutely beautiful concert, part of a really special series that I look forward to seeing come back after the pandemic. The Mount Wilson concert series is called Concerts in the Dome.
Okay.
And that's money that's raised to help support the foundation that keeps the premises afloat. Of course, the site is still used for some scientific research, but
Okay.
that telescope itself requires a lot of maintenance and it's not really scientifically useful now. There are much bigger telescopes in much clearer skies that
All
are used
right. And
for
yeah, the
the.
technology has advanced so much since they had those early things. But I remember we used to go up there when I was a kid and look out into outer space. And I would tell my parents, I want to be out there.
Oh, wow.
I don't like it here.
Wow.
Because I've always felt more at home um, in another galaxy in some ways. But going back to your compositional process, I really want to kind of deep
Yeah,
dive
that's the
into
other
that.
part of the question I need to answer.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I
sorry to interrupt
really,
you.
I really did write pieces for that dome, for that particular concert, because the acoustics of the space are very, very unique. It's a
Mm,
huge metal dome, and the resonance is incredibly long in the space. It's part of the reason that it's so magical.
that's like
Um,
the reverb for yeah.
it's the reverb that rivals the cathedrals of Europe. And so I wanted to write music that would highlight the qualities of that space, so extremely slow tempos, very slow harmonic changes, that
Uh-huh.
you have time to absorb things. If you go too fast in that kind of acoustic space, you end up with a muddy mess. So
Oh, interesting. So you're really considering that live space.
for that, I did because I knew the venue. I knew what I was working towards. Otherwise, my compositional process is typically inspired by um, a story, a poem. I'm very visual,
Okay.
and that's one of the reasons I enjoy making music videos because I feel as though what I explore in my music is so visual when I write it that it brings to the listener a more complete vision of everything I imagined when I was making the music.
Uh-huh.
So usually it's driven by some context that's very specific. Even if the piece is not sung, it may well have been inspired by poetry or by a story.
Isn't that interesting that instrumental music, and you and I write a lot of it. I mean, I've done 39 albums of it by now. And uh, there's always the two sides of that coin because sometimes people that are not that familiar with jazz will come to a Rob Mullins show, and then I'll get the comments later on the internet. How come the singer didn't show up? And it's like, well, it's an instrumental night of music, but some people are so keyed in to actually the lyrics of that poem being in there and then relating to the sound of the words. And my idea was always, if it's just an instrumental song, people can make up their own words as they go based on the emotions that the audio creates for them.
Don't you find that's fascinating that when you have an idea for something, you may put it into music and then discover as it's performed and you hear feedback from the audience that they had their own twist on the experience that
Right.
really brings more to the music than you anticipated when you wrote it.
I think it allows this broader interpretation because each person gets to feel their own experience, like you said, instead of, as in things like country music, it's very focused and to the point, and everybody's getting the same point. My dog died, my girlfriend left me, my truck is in the lake right now. you know all of those kind of things. But I mean, did you ever imagine yourself being a pop star? Because you obviously could have been a model or any number of entertainment-y kind of things. And how many languages do you speak anyway?
Just two.
Oh, just two.
I learn what I need when we travel to add to the experience, but I forget it immediately when we leave the country.
Oh, that's like my Japanese is that bad. The only thing I can still say is I can say sumi masen rapungi doku desu ka, arigato gozaimasu, and that's about it. That's all I got left.
What did you just say in Japanese?
I just said, excuse me, can you tell me where the city of Roppongi is? Because that's the American tourist area. And then the other one, arigato gozaimasu, is, I think it's thank you. Yeah. Yeah. But, so your other language is French or Greek then?
French.
Okay. So did your dad ever, when you made him really mad when you were little, did he ever like walk around cursing in Greek and nobody knew what he was talking about?
Not that I remember.
Because my dad would do stuff like that, and he only spoke English, and sadly, we understood exactly what he meant, and it wasn't good. it was not a good thing. So now I want to talk about jokes for a second, because I know that your music is really serious.
Okay.
And I just finished doing an arrangement for a new age band called Brooks and Day, and it's Send in the Clowns, which is, one of the most depressing songs ever written. If you do the arranging right, it makes you want to cry. It's one of those, 16 bars in, you're looking around for a kitchen knife to just finish the job on yourself. It's that emotional. So, and a lot of your music really invokes these like, sad, really deep kind of longing feelings and stuff. So what are some of your favorite jokes? Does anything make you laugh? Because I only have one classical joke.
I love to laugh, but I'm one of the people who will enjoy a joke fully and then not remember even the punchline 10 minutes later.
Oh,
So,
okay. Well, I only have one jazz joke that's about classical people. Do you want to hear it? I mean, we could skip it. It's a G-rated joke, so it's nothing mean and nasty, but it goes like this. What's the difference between an oboe and an onion?
an oboe and an onion. I really don't know.
Nobody cries when you chop up the oboe.
Oh no.
Oh, that's horrible. That is horrible.
It's one of the hardest instruments to play.
I just always thought, because one of the reasons I picked the piano, and I don't know why you did over violin, you can tell me, but when I would watch oboe players making their reeds, I would see them doing all this stuff, and it takes like hours, and you have to have a shaver. And I dated an oboe player once, and it was just exhausting. And I was trying to watch basketball while she made these things, and I'm thinking, we could have like gone for a 20-mile bike ride by the time you finished one of them. And that's so much dedication. But the piano takes a lot of pressure off, because you can just sit down and hit one note. And if it's not right, you can blame the tuner.
Totally.
So you started with classical piano, and then I guess you studied composition and orchestration. And how did all that go? Was that in Europe or was it in America?
That was in America. Yeah. Yeah.
And
You studied here too, right?
well, yeah, I did, but I had just such a weird background because I came from a listening ear, not the written ear.
So is reading hard for you?
Well, it was for a while. I mean, I was a classical percussionist, and I was an
Yeah,
all-star
rhythm.
at everything, but that's not like reading 10 piano notes with all those accidentals. And I mean, did you have to play Rachmaninoff and suffer through all of those fingerings and stuff? Honestly. Did you have to?
I love Rachmaninoff.
I know, but the guy's hands must have been like
Yeah.
triple jointed because I mean, were you able to reach all that stuff?
No, those are chords that I have to roll or
Oh,
leave out
okay.
something in the center. Yeah. It's a unique challenge for sure.
Yeah. Well, is he one of your favorite of the piano pedagogy people? Do you really love him?
He is, he is. And you know, I don't know if you're aware, but for some international piano competitions, they have what's called a 7/8 keyboard. Have you heard of that?
Oh.
So this helps to level the playing field for pianists that want to play really big pieces,
Oh,
but
and their hands are small.
hands. Um,
Okay.
it allows for those people to, in some competitions, request a change of the keyboard itself. The rest of the piano is the same. It's just the key mechanism itself that just pulls out, and then they put in another keyboard, which is only 7/8 the width of the
Wow.
key, and it makes it accessible. Of course, these are pianists that have been practicing on a 7/8 keyboard as well. Otherwise, you can imagine your landing would be wrong. You would quickly
Right.
not find your bearings. But I think that that's something that helps to make things more accessible for these really big lists, in particular,
Uh-huh.
Rachmaninoff as well. For these
So who's your all-time favorite of the piano composers? Because I have mine.
I don't know if I can pick, but
Well, just for they're all dead, so you're not going to hurt anybody's feelings.
no, all right. At the moment, probably Chopin. But it's a
Okay.
rotation between Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Liszt, Brahms, Debussy.
Mm.
So you'll hear all of these influences in my writing.
Yeah, I definitely heard the Debussy and the Chopin in there, and that's when I was thinking about suicide. You know,
Oh,
because because that it's so sad. Some of the stuff you do is just so powerful emotionally. And then do you write these things down and then just like rehearse them? And what does your family say? Because when I was working on that Send in the Clowns thing, I wasn't working in an isolated environment that people around me, and it took me 10 days to produce that track for that band. But by about the eighth day, everybody was like, would you just finish the freaking song? Because we all want to die. Like, we're so sad. And do you have to compose in an isolated environment like a studio or a practice room? Are you comfortable doing that in front of your family? Because I'm not really.
I much prefer privacy. My favorite space to compose in is a really quiet studio after dark. I'm really nocturnal. My creativity blossoms after dark.
Okay.
And yeah, I just cup of hot tea, maybe a cat nearby, and you know that's it. But you didn't tell me who is your favorite composer of the
No,
classical.
because he's not on your list because it's Beethoven.
Oh, well, I mean, all beloved Beethoven, of course, but in terms of the influences that I'm obsessed with,
Right.
he
Well, you
doesn't
don't
make
seem like a
that
Beethoven
list.
type, though. Like, you
I
know,
love Beethoven. I know I do. I really do. It's just,
but he
I
doesn't have the
look at
same
him
like
as a friend.
sophistication as Debussy and so. Well, and Debussy is French, and you are too. And then there's Chopin has got just he's insane. But Beethoven, the reason I latched onto him is because I could just understand it right away. I mean, I would not have the music, and I could kind of play it. Then I'd buy the book, and I would study the score as I was learning to read the staff, and I could kind of predict what he was going to do next because I could just tell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because
That
I was that
classical
in
logic.
tune. I was
Yeah.
that in tune with
Don't
him.
you have that with Mozart too?
No, I can't stand Mozart.
But it's just as logical.
Well, it is, except the way that they portrayed Mozart's personality in that movie about him.
Amadeus?
Yeah, it kind of makes you hate him because I think they probably over exaggerated what a goofball he was,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, I was guilty of that Mozart stereotype when I was young because I was really talented and I was good. And I would just, you know, say, hey, man, look at me, everybody look at me. And what got bad about it is when I first played a concert in LA, the LA Times came to review me.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that I could never be taken seriously as a jazz musician because I was having too much fun and smiling too much. And
Not the point.
no,
Oh, just forget it. Critics are there to criticize. They're
did you ever
defending
get a
their existence is based on finding something wrong with the music.
well, did you ever get a bad review and then you saw it the next day and you were like really upset? Has that ever happened to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then
Don't publicize it.
sometimes the most funny things down the road later in your career are things like that. Because I remember holding that review up a few years ago to a concert, and this was in Denver, and I have so many longtime fans here, and they all started like booing and chanting, like, down with the LA Times, down with the LA Times.
There's actually a way that you can really make it fun, and I did this with a very dear friend of mine who's a composer here in LA, Todd
Okay.
Mason, and in fact he runs a really wonderful home concert series that I hope will come back after it's safe. And he and I just laugh so much about rejection letters. And especially when you get a rejection letter from a competition or from a major series that you submitted to, an orchestra that you submitted to, any kind of call for scores, that you get all excited. Especially if you wrote something specific, you really give it your all and you submit. Sometimes there are submission fees, which I can understand because you want to make sure that they hire professional judges who would probably be paid for the work. And so you've spent money, you've spent a lot of time, and you've attached a lot of hope to that potential premiere. And when you get
this sounds like the last 10 dates I went on.
when you get the rejection, it's like, wow. Especially because most of the time there's such template styles. We had an uncommonly good submission this year. The number of entries was extremely high, and unfortunately yours was not included. And it's like, yeah, how many, you sent this to hundreds of people, and it's not personalized, so you really feel unimportant, and you wonder if anybody even listened to what you sent, because it was amazing and nobody listened, right?
Wow, that's incredible.
So you joke about it, and you find camaraderie with your other composer friends, because we've all had rejection letters.
Yeah, it's like those, after the juries or the auditions, and you're looking at that wall in the fine arts department, and you're just hoping that your name is on that list of the people that are going to go tour Germany.
Yeah.
And you're reading down there and it's alphabetical, and I would get to M and it would say, and I would go, oh no. But you find your way through the problems and those things, and I'm sure it's really challenging in your genre to have enough people interested in it in order to make it work economically. Because my teachers always told me, they said, you love jazz and you love classical, and those are the two worst paying, most difficult genres to be in. So the fact that you've, how many albums now? It's like 7 or 5 or
5 for me directly, and then I've been on in collaboration with many other albums.
Okay, so then did you end up in the recording academy just kind of the same way you ended up having a piano teacher? Like, you don't really know, you just walked in one day and boom, you got a letter and you were cool? How did that happen?
I think it was through my friend Darlene Koldenhoven.
Oh, I know Darlene.
Amazing soprano, well known for her leading role in Sister Act, and singing that exquisite aria with Yanni live at the Acropolis.
Right, and that's one of those things too. I did an interview with Yanni's drummer from those days a couple weeks ago, and we were laughing about the whole Yanni thing, because it's like, on one hand, that Yanni was so criticized in the press for multiple reasons. And on one hand, if you were with Yanni, you want to kind of keep that quiet and low key for a while, and then later on you come back, and I saw Darlene posting on Facebook the video of her live at the Acropolis, and I was like, wow, it's incredible. That must have been great, right?
Yeah, she's a really remarkable vocalist. I'm surrounded by amazing singers. How can I not write vocal music?
Right, exactly. Well, do you do anything with trumpets or trombones or anything like that, or is it mostly this sound that you've kind of got going right now?
I've written one brass quartet. but it hasn't been performed and I haven't pursued it because I haven't seen an outlet for it.
Uh-huh.
I really get attached to working on projects for which I see an outlet, an end result. So I'm writing for choirs because I have at least two choirs that are always really excited to see what I'm writing.
Wow.
For
How do you
vocal-
imagine to hear all that in your head without the singers there when you're writing it, though? How do you do that?
Um, you know, the piano is just such a versatile instrument. I basically try out the material at the piano. I compose as Beethoven did. I sit at the piano with my staff paper and my pencil and a big eraser. And, and I try ideas until something works. And my scores are, like Beethoven, a complete chaotic mess. I use color coding because I jump so many times, put this idea here, put this idea there.
All
And
right.
I can't make it out anymore, so I'm like, okay, pink heart here goes to pink heart there. Yellow star here goes to yellow star there. And that's how I reconstruct the score eventually to
Interesting.
make something clean, to eventually put in notation software. I use Finale.
Uh-huh.
And there, to finalize the answer to your question, everything I thought I was conceiving at the piano, when it goes into Finale, they have, it's awful, it's MIDI, but there is some feeling for what the sound could be when it's
With the virtual instruments and stuff.
Yeah.
That was another thing I always hated about Mozart, because I looked at his early scores and everything was just perfect all the time. And it's like that guy in high school who's the football player and he's the best looking guy in school. Then he's the star of the church choir, and he gets straight A's on everything, and he only dates the hottest girl in the school. How do you not hate that guy? I mean, so.
I don't know. I think that it's really important to see those that seem impossibly perfect and appreciate what they've managed to create and aspire to that yourself. I mean, I have had so many failures and so many challenges, and I don't promote those things, especially not,
Well,
especially not really publicly. But,
yeah, I mean, if I were you, I would, we had this talk too, because I have an older sister who's a similar level of the physical beauty. And you and I were talking about this the other day. Isn't it interesting that so many people assume that good-looking people never have any problems? Like it's just their life is just perfect, and they they fly over on Virgin Atlantic in first class. Yeah, first class when they're in the crib, and then they're carried right to, creperie, the finest creperie, and then they grow up in there. And the piano teachers are all, figures out of the Bible that teach for free, and then they do housework at the grounds on the weekend. It's not really all like that, right?
No.
Or am I wrong?
Truly not. No, I mean, in just the albums that I've done, and it's not that many, I can tell you even a short list of the challenges that have made me really creative in finding solutions, because I've seen, a studio space that was booked for months get canceled a couple of weeks before a recording session, and I was in France at the time, so there was a 9-hour time difference.
Ouch.
And I had laryngitis, so I had no voice.
Oh my God.
And I remember just frantically looking on Google for recording studios in LA with a good piano and finding their phone numbers. And I typed a script for my mother to read. She speaks English quite well, but with a strong accent, and sometimes she struggles to find her words. So I typed a script for her, because I could not make the calls to all the studios. She was on the phone, and of course it's the middle of the night, because France is 9 hours ahead of America.
Oh my God. And you were trying to pull this all back together in an emergency situation.
Totally emergency. I've seen piano tuners that couldn't tune, and last minute you have to find a tuner for the recording session. There's been faulty equipment that wasn't caught by the recording engineer during the recording that you uncover in the mixing phase, and it's full of pops and clicks, and it's murder. I've had to change engineers in the middle of projects.
Ooh, that's a horrible one.
I've had to change album artists, designers in the middle of projects as well.
That's a
Um,
horrible one too.
I've seen, I feel as though it's so much with videos. Oh my gosh, so much goes wrong with videos. Hard drives that get flooded in a flood, like the house floods and you lose the hard drive.
Or they
So all
burn
your
up in the
footage is
fire.
gone. Almost a fire, but in this case, a flood. I've seen a whole concert video be stolen because the hard drive was taken in a robbery, and so all that concert footage gone. Um,
Oh,
I had one videographer the day before filming who was attacked in the street by a crazy person and was basically had a gash across half his head, and anyone else would have died, but he was a trained boxer, and
whoa.
he took a hit from a 2x4, and this crazy person stuck around with the wood, and this guy had just enough time before he passed out from the blood to deliver one good punch to put the other guy down on the ground before he fell, and ended up in the emergency room all night. I can't tell you all the last minute chaotic stuff you never imagined
Mhm.
that will happen when you have a creative project that involves lots of people.
Right.
It's
Well, and then how
always
do how do you keep your composure in the middle of all that kind of stuff? Because, you know, um, I'm mostly a self-finance person. I know sometimes you finance your own stuff too. And it's so frustrating because you're thinking, you're on the clock here and you've got these pricey engineers and then all these musicians out there. Studios can get hot, the air conditioning can go weird, somebody breaks a string. I mean, I was doing a live album where we had 6 hours to do the whole thing, jazz trio in San Diego. And on the second tune, the upright, I go one, two, a 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. The guy hits the upright bass and the neck comes completely off of the body of the bass and the strings go boing.
oh,
And
um,
it's Sunday at like 10 in the morning on a holiday weekend, and we're in this remote mountain area of San Diego. And I spent the entire day calling around and trying to find a bass for this guy to play. You know,
I had a similar, not quite that dramatic, not quite that last minute, but on the album Poem,
uh-huh.
there's a track with cello, and we're we were blessed to have this amazing Los Angeles Opera principal cellist, John Waltz. And 2 weeks before the recording session, I was reading the news, and because I follow a lot of classical news, something was prompted and came up in my news feed.
Ah,
LA Opera principal cellist, instrument stolen. And I thought, I hope this is old news.
oh no.
And I looked at the description, it was that day, or the day before. And in fact, yes, my cellist had just had his cello stolen. The story ends well. A few days later, it was recovered undamaged.
Wow, a miracle.
But for a couple of days, it was just drama. What can you do? But
Right.
I've
Yeah.
just got to say, I've relied so much on these amazing artists. The people I work with are probably the greatest gift of the process of making music. Making Poem in particular, I knew both of these sopranos before we did this album, but the process of working together for 2 years really made us sisters. And we spend as much time together socially as we possibly can because it's such a source of spiritual rejuvenation for each of us. The
Wow.
piano. So I play on the solo tracks of Poem, and then for the ensemble performances, we had this amazing, wonderful pianist whom you may know, Robert Thies, and he's amazing. He's obviously a serious classical musician, but he's unique in the classical realm because, like Sangeeta, he's capable of leaving the classical realm behind and playing other genres. And he also has an album in New Age this year,
Oh, nice.
Blue Landscapes. I didn't know if you even knew that, but you know, he won the 1995 Prokofiev International Piano Competition, and it was something that really launched his career because he was the first American in 40 years to win a Russian international piano competition. No one since Van Cliburn in the 50s.
Wow.
And
That's pretty huge because I know about that whole Russian USA competition because I was in Moscow for a while. Yeah.
oh, you were? There's a
Yeah,
whole other conversation to have with you there.
it is. Well, it's interesting that we're getting, so deep into all of these different people and these things that are going on because I gave you a little bit of a hard time today about your music being so sad, but it's very powerful and it's really well done. And I noticed too that there's a lot of space in there. Like you said, you're not in a hurry. And it's kind of like, you're making this little journey and all of a sudden on this one thing, you hit this, you did this one run and the camera went in and it was just like, oh, you're able to use that dramatic element of surprise. Like you draw your listeners in that way. Is that a conscious thing that you go, because in the jingle market and in network TV, it's like, okay, we have 52 seconds to draw them in, and then we got to have 2 seconds of the big surprise, and then a hard stop, and then we're going to sell beer.
I'm so happy I don't have to be constrained by those expectations on timing. No, I write what seems to work for the music and for the story, for the message in the moment. So, the subject matter of poem, it can be seen globally as somewhat dark, but it's not entirely about sadness. It's about life, and it's about the experiences that are almost inevitable for everyone. And, yes, of course, we all expect to avoid pain, but we can never avoid loss.
Right. Well, did you lose something personal that was the catalyst for this, or was it just something you were imagining or channeling? Because sometimes,
Yeah, there's a
I,
lot of channeling. Yeah.
because sometimes I see, on Facebook, the other members of our academy saying, here I was in this terrible automobile accident 2 years ago, and I haven't been able to use my fingers to hold a pencil to write any music until last week. And now I did this album and this and that. But you spent 2 years on your album. Isn't that a long time?
No.
No.
I mean, I always want to do the work in half the time,
Mhm.
but it's usually not realistic because I have very uncompromising standards. I'm such
Uh,
a perfectionist.
uh-huh.
So I would just rather take the time to really live with things. I'm not that quick as a composer. Sometimes things come out really quickly, almost in a, as I said, a channeling experience.
Right, sure.
But even when that occurs, I will live with my music frequently for months to ensure that it's really what I intend, and that even through changes of perspective in my life, I can still go back to that piece and it will always generate what I intend for it to generate. So that in some sense it's consistent. It's not just dependent upon what mood you're in when you listen, that it will always generate what it needs to no matter what mood you're in.
Well, that's the mark of a great composer, somebody who's that thorough, and you're obviously very brilliant as well. And that amount of preparation and care and love for it, I think, really shows in your new project. And I just want to wish you a lot of luck with it because the standards at the Academy, of course, are very high, and there's always growing amounts of entries and everything. And classical compendium is something I didn't know that much about until today. I'm really happy you let all of us know. So what is
I
the
hope,
rest?
yeah, I hope it is in compendium. I tried to confirm this through the label. They weren't able to tell me before today, so
Okay.
if it's not, I don't understand why it wouldn't be in compendium because it's ensemble, of quartets, of duets, of trio and solo, and so
Right.
because of those subcategorizations,
Well, yeah.
that's why the label submitted it into compendium. But because almost all 7 of the 9 tracks involve vocals, it's not inconceivable they may move it to vocal but it wouldn't make much sense to me anyway.
Right. Well, that's one of those things where I always commend people, and especially members of the Academy who are submitting to come on my show, and say thank you for the huge amount of effort. And it's not a cheap thing to do, and it's very time consuming. And it's like, I don't have any physical children because I was always that person that was scared that my kid would end up being like this weird looking, creature that would just ask me for money and then go on the internet and say my music sucked.
Oh,
So,
no.
so I didn't take that chance, but I look at my own albums kind of as my own children and my family, because I send them out there into the world and they do the opposite of normal kids, which is they send money back to me. You know, they're sending
Oh.
money back, and I just wish you a lot of success with everything that's going on. And hopefully we'll get a chance to sit down and watch you make that angelic Danaë walk up to the thing. I can already picture it, floating, and then a little piece up there, and then if you do your acceptance speech, you're gonna do it in English, right?
Yes, don't worry.
Okay, that would be good. And
Oh,
remember, you
wow.
don't have a lot of time to do that because they do have to sell, like, uh, uh, Lakers tickets.
I would honestly be surprised if the event were in physical live format this year. I suspect it
Isn't
will.
that crazy? But the one thing I think about is I remember 2 years ago, parking was $100. And so if I don't have to park $100 or go down to Staples, I'm probably going to be okay with that this coming January. I mean, really, it's
Well, then
crazy.
how am I going to give you a hug?
Well, we're gonna do it. We'll work on that, and I'll see if I can come up with a plan. But in the meantime, one last thing. You're obviously a teacher, and then do you have a specific thing that you tell your students? Because my students follow me, to gigs, and they follow my Facebooks, and they follow this podcast and stuff. I mean, what do you tell your students uh, as far as their future careers and stuff? Do you say, don't do this unless you're a millionaire, or look at how it's working out for me? I get to deal with cellos being stolen and guys being hit by force. I mean, what do you tell them as the last word? What do you have to say about that?
For students who are extremely talented and who I know live and breathe this, I do encourage them to do it. And I tell them that it's literally got to be the only thing they can imagine themselves doing, because it's going to take everything they have, and it will always be hard because they're always perfectionists. I can only remind them that the purpose of the art is the communication of the message, that the value of the music is in whether you convey the emotions, and it's not about note perfection.
Mm.
And just try to relieve them of extremely high expectations and allow them to try to bring things down to enjoying the process, the individual moment, even
Ah,
taking things one phrase at a time and asking oneself, how do I reconnect with this music after 100 hours of practicing? You cannot just play on autopilot. You have to find the thread that still connects with your heart for the reason that you originally wanted to learn that piece. So phrase by phrase, what matters to me here? What do I want to convey?
wow, that's incredible. I mean, I just came at it, that was all beautiful and so true what you said. And just the simplistic Neanderthal human male side of me is, I just love how I feel after I play music.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel so great after I write and I have a good session, or if I do a gig like I did my first gig yesterday at an outdoor private thing, and I hadn't played a gig since February, and I had forgotten that whole kind of cathartic release that I get from being on a stage and playing with live people and feeling all those feelings, because you can't really get that feeling out of a video game. You really can't. You really can't. And the kids are all pushed into these video basement lives where they're down there just murdering other people from the enemy force and stuff. And I'm glad that we have music teachers like you, because if I was a little boy and I was trying to learn piano, I would definitely pick you. I'd be like, I want to go. I want to go study with Danaë because she's just so cool. I would definitely pick you. So there you go.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks to Pierre's Fine Pianos for the sponsorship today. Good luck on the Grammys with your poem album, and I'm sure I'll see you around Facebook sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's always a pleasure talking to you. You know, we've done this for like 2 hours on the phone, so we can always just call and pick up on all the threads we didn't cover right now.
That sounds good, and I'll be happy to call as soon as the Lakers win the game tonight. So,
Sounds good.
you have a wonderful night. I'll